welcome to the Wisp Mama Bear Podcast, Episode 12. I'm your host, Sarah Yacoub. Today's topic, survival brain meets politics. Data journalist Elliot Ramos took a look at where outgoing President Donald Trump gained support in this past election. He then compared those numbers to the national data on unemployment. Elliot found that the former president's support held steady or actually increased in places where unemployment rose the most in the year prior to the election. Hold up, how does that make any sense at all? Conventional wisdom would suggest that people who are worse off come election time would be expected to vote against those in charge. The buck stops at the top, so naturally they have to go. That didn't happen here. So what did? Well, that's a question that will keep scholars busy for generations to come. I do not pretend to have all the answers, but here are some thoughts. People, like animals, are wired to fight to survive. The idea of fight, flight, or freeze stems from how our brain responds to perceived threats. Survival brain. For those of us who know trauma, triggered memories of that trauma provoke trauma brain, which is another name for survival brain. The microevolution of chimps and bonobos offers some interesting insight into behavior. Chimps and bonobos? Stay with me, this is actually pretty cool. Once upon a time, a population of apes lived in and around the Congo River. The river at this time was narrow and shallow. As the river widened and deepened, the population of apes split into two. Those to the north of the river had to coexist with big, mean gorillas and a habitat with not a lot of food. The apes below the river did not have to compete with gorillas and lived in a habitat where food was plentiful. Being a jerk ape in a community where food was plentiful and without big mean gorillas was not socially advantageous. Jerk apes were more likely to not get the girl, more likely to be voted off the proverbial island, and more likely to become isolated. Being less likely to reproduce and pass on their jerk ape genes meant those traits diminished to extinction generation after generation. Turning now to the apes that got pushed to the north of the Congo River. Given the scarcity of food and presence of big, mean gorillas, being a jerk ape meant getting the food and surviving. Apes who exerted the dominance needed to outcompete the others and survive got the girl, which means they also got the babies. Jerk ape genes were an asset, and genes for that asset got passed along generation after generation. What resulted? Bonobos to the south of the Congo, and chimpanzees to the north. Bonobos are female-led. They share food with other bonobos. They bite but don't kill. They get it on for fun and to facilitate social interactions and dynamics. Chimps, in contrast, are run by alpha males. They do not share food. They do not fornicate for recreation, but rather just for reproduction. And they kill. What are the takeaways here? Higher rates of unemployment generally mean more insecurity for survival. Whether that's survival in the sense of not having enough food, or in the sense of losing one's home, or being unable to provide for one's family, threats to survival, to life as we know it, can take many forms. When life is scary, the biggest jerk around instinctually feels safe. Yes, they're a big jerk, but they're our big jerk, and someone who we want on our side to fight big mean gorillas or to dominate in the fight for scarce resources. People like Donald Trump present the illusion of strength. He will lie, cheat, and steal his way to the top, and if that means you ride to the top too, you may be more inclined to excuse the means to the desirable end, especially when scared, threatened, or even desperate. We're wired to like sweet, fattening food. Why? Because sweetness connotes ripe, edible fruit, fat offers the calories needed to survive. For cave people running around in a world without supermarkets trying to survive, those with traits that led them to sweet and fatty foods were more likely to live. Those more likely to survive were more likely to reproduce, which meant passing on their genes, that which set them apart from others, to future generations. The dessert industry is the capitalization on very strongly evolved traits that wire us to seek sweet, fatty food. If you really think about it, it's brilliant. What's the point? What does our sweet tooth have to do with politics? Much like how the best desserts play to our strongest, most basic instincts, politicians like Donald Trump have figured out how to play to our survival brain, our trauma brain. They appeal not to truth, logic, reason, light, love, but to that which we crave for survival, to feel safe when faced with threats to ourselves or to our family. If our only goal is to survive, then yes, go with someone like Donald Trump or the current leaders of the Wisconsin Republican Party. If instead we want to not only survive but thrive and actually live, we have to be willing to access the rest of our brain. If our survival or trauma brain is fight, flight, or freeze, the rest of our brain includes the parts that allow for empathy, forethought, cooperation, kindness, planning, the arts, creativity, innovation. Episode 13 tomorrow. See you there.